Weathering the Storm, a special edition of U.S. Farm Report, is brought to you by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, weather or not. This is U.S. Farm Report.
Welcome to Weathering the Storm, a special edition of U.S. Farm Report. I'm Tyne Morgan, and here's what's in store over the next 60 minutes. Weathering 2020 as a major black swan takes hold on the markets. COVID-19 continues to crash the markets at a time when traders typically focus on planting. Questions about what will get planted and what won't. After a fierce fight against the flood in 2019, the devastation is still planted in fields.
We've got about 800 acres that we will not farm this spring.
We'll show you how much has changed and how much hasn't in a year. A fight against the flood in the Midwest and a fight for water in the West.
We know there's going to be land that's either fallowed or retired or taken out of production, but the question mark right now is how much.
As the virus and weather worries rise, the spring forecast is a mixed bag for farmers. And in John's world,
what's the link between weather and COVID-19?
Well, welcome to this special edition of U.S. Farm Report, Weathering the Storm. And our backdrop this weekend, the Missouri River Basin. A year ago, the fight against the Missouri River started. That fight lasting more than 200 days, and one that's creating worries about if flooding in 2020 could rival what residents saw in 2019. But another crisis facing farmers right now, COVID-19. As schools and businesses shut down and borders closed to everything but commerce, economists fear a global recession is already here. Commodity prices also getting the brunt of concerns last week and the beginning of this week. But some good news for agriculture late this week. Homeland Security deeming agriculture as critical, one of the 16 industries now in that category. That means agriculture will be allowed to maintain normal working schedules as tighter quarantine measures are possibly put into place. One issue that could arise with ag labor, not enough immigrant labor under the H-2A program. Right now, there's a temporary halt in place for processing those H-2A visas in Mexico due to the fact that U.S. embassies and consulates are being temporarily closed. Cattle futures seen green on Friday, but that's after cattle futures fell 28% since mid-January. Some of that on fears slaughter plants will be forced to close from COVID-19. A group of senators and NCBA also asking Congress for help in the form of financial relief for cattle producers in any aid package related to COVID-19 that's passed. But also seeing positive prices on Friday, corn, soybeans, and wheat. That's after USDA confirmed on Friday China did buy U.S. corn and wheat and more soybeans sold to unknown destinations. So how is the spring forecast shaping up, and are we starting out the year better or worse than last year? Clinton Griffiths explores what the outcome could be in Weathering the Storm.
You remember planting in 2019, the wet, muddy slog that lasted from April through July. It started during the winter months.
The winter of 2018-19 was, of course, the wettest on record for the lower 48 states.
All of that moisture came on top of significant cold. This year, things are different.
We do not have the pervasively cold pattern that locked in over the Corn Belt a year ago, and so that's kept the frost depth in the soils much milder, much less cold than a year ago. So there's been more of a chance for the heavy moisture that we have to actually move into drain tiles and streams.
It was only the 19th wettest winter during the 125-year period of record. So if you look at the country as a whole, it was considerably drier, but still on the wet side if you look at the historical rankings.
Looking at NASA's root zone moisture maps, you can see how wet many areas still are. This was March 25th, 2019, right after that bomb cyclone hit the Midwest. This is that same root zone moisture map from this year.
We actually have wetter conditions than what we saw this time a year ago in parts of the northern Corn Belt, the northern plains, the Great Lakes region, and a few areas in the eastern Corn Belt as well.
Rippey says those areas are ripe for more flooding and planting delays, some of which has already started, like this flooding in the Mid-South and South during February. So what can producers expect weather-wise this spring? The National Climate Prediction Center is calling for warmer weather across most of the country, with one exception.
I would say the northern quarter of the Corn Belt, north of Interstate 90, where the snowpack has still been very heavy, and there's going to be some real issues in that part of the country.
When we look at temperatures, I'm going above normal in most of this area, probably not the northwestern plains, and that wasn't the case last year. So you can dry things down a little quicker when you're warmer, and you probably hope for more scattered, like heavy thunderstorms rather than widespread general rains.
And speaking of rain, the Climate Prediction Center calling for greater chances of moisture across most of the east.
This is a pretty wet weather pattern. I mean, it's bringing a lot of Pacific moisture into the pattern. We always have the Gulf moisture available, and so I still see fairly wet conditions more than likely through the middle of the country, a lot of the Corn Belt.
Getting specific to the Midwest, I think given the fact that we have a lot of snow to melt in the far north and we have wet weather still on the way, northern and eastern Corn Belt, I think it will be a slow start to the planting season. The best chance for active field work on a fairly normal schedule will be the southwestern quadrant of the Corn Belt. That would include Nebraska, southern Iowa, northern Missouri. In fact, the areas that flooded a year ago.
But not everywhere is a target for warmer weather and more moisture. Alaska is coming off its coldest winter in 21 years, and now that air is moving into the western U.S.
For the most part, that cold air has been bottled up. Now in mid-March, it's making a push to the south, and it looks like it's going to stick around for a while across the western United States and for parts of the northern plains.
However, that cold threat won't last forever, and milder temperatures are on the horizon.
Anytime you have all this moisture coming up here, moisture coming into the southwest, at least in this case, unlike last year, we're not cold. We are expected to be above normal, and that does help to dry things down a little quicker.
Drying down and hopefully getting into the field sooner rather than later.
We know that as we transition out of winter into spring, that we can get some pretty heavy storms. But if we can stay away from this repetitive cycle of big storms during April, that's going to be a big key for me, especially again in the eastern belt.
Thanks, Clinton. And as we know, a lot can change with forecasts. So from that long-term forecast to more short-term, meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us next. Meteorologist Mike Hoffman joins us now with weather. Mike, we've been talking about it really all year. That root zone moisture map you say is worse than last year. But as we head into April, do you think that wet weather persists?
Well, thanks, Tyne. Yeah, I really think a lot of this area probably continues to get a fair amount of moisture over the next 30 days. I am concerned about it. But I will say, when you see my longer range forecast, that the next 30 days should be warmer than they were last year in most of the Corn Belt, except perhaps the western section. So we'll get to that in a moment. But boy, there's still a lot of wet conditions. Great Lakes all the way down into northern Mississippi and Alabama, back into western Texas, on up through the Plain States and back into Wyoming and Montana. Dry areas then, parts of Colorado, throughout the northwest, South Texas is turning drier as far as the root zone is concerned, and Florida is getting drier in that situation as well, with some dry areas up and down the eastern seaboard. Now the drought monitor, the longer term drought, obviously there's nothing in those wet areas in the middle and eastern portions of the country. Very dry conditions, though, continue to expand, or at least get worse in a small part of Texas. I probably shouldn't have used the word expand there, because it isn't like it's growing northward so far. We're seeing extreme drought, parts of the area from northwest of Houston all the way down toward the Rio Grande. The persistent area, the Four Corner region into southwestern Kansas, continues to be dry, and central California on up into Oregon has gotten drier over the past month or so. All right, here's the pattern. As we go through the end of the weekend here, you can see a storm system coming in off the East Coast. Little ripples through the northern tier of states mean the weaker storm systems moving on through. You can see that right through the middle of the week. And then we see the trough redevelop out west again. That will start to come eastward also. So we're going to have this battle, as we usually do this time of the year, of the colder air up in Canada and the warmer air surging occasionally northward through the eastern half of the country. It sure looks like things kind of remain rather chilly, though, farther west. You can see as we head into next weekend, computer models showing a storm system moving through the eastern Great Lakes by that point. So here's Monday. We'll go day by day here. Storm system near the nation's capital, snow to the northwest of it Some models are putting down a decent amount. They kind of been flip-flopping on that. Scattered showers and thunderstorms along the southeast and Gulf Coast. 2 storm systems out west causing rain and mountain snows. Those quickly move eastward across the country all the way into the eastern sections. By the time we get to Wednesday, then you can see a frontal system through the middle of the country. Heading through Friday, storm system in the northeast, 1 east of Denver, both of those causing some moisture. Now, as far as the 30-day outlook is concerned, below normal temperatures, I'm going for the northwestern plains, northern Rockies. Above normal, though, most areas east of the Mississippi River, and then southward through the Gulf Coast area into Texas. 30-day outlook for precipitation above normal from the Gulf Coast, eastern seaboard, back across the central plains into the central Rockies. Small area below normal western and southwestern Texas and the Pacific Northwest. Tyne?
Thanks so much, Mike. So what trends are leading to some of these spring forecasts that we've been showing you? Well, up next, we'll head back into our studios with Drew Lerner of World Weather.
This segment is brought to you by the foundational partners of America's Conservation Ag Movement, a diverse public-private partnership empowering farmers and ranchers in their conservation agriculture journey for resilient businesses, healthier ecosystems, and stronger communities.
Welcome back for our Weathering the Storm special, here now with Drew Lerner. And Drew, let's start off by talking about weather. There's a lot of similarities when it comes to this time last year, but a lot of differences. I mean, do you think we're better off heading into spring planting?
We are. It depends on where you're talking, right? The Delta is in no better shape, right? We haven't done anything down there except for in southern parts, Louisiana and southern Mississippi. So from that perspective, it's just as bad as last year. The river's flooded just like it did last year. It's not as severe, but it's still the same impact. So down there, it probably is very similar. But in the Ohio River Basin area, it's not quite as severe. And farther north you go, the drier it becomes. We do have a lot of snow on the ground, of course, in the Red River Basin area in the upper Midwest. So that area probably, is vulnerable, but not necessarily going to be as bad as it was last year. And I really think the bigger picture right now is pointed in the right direction, that we are not going to see an absolute repeat.
Well, Drew, when you look at the spring last year, I mean, some folks got in the field in April, but really it was the month of May where some farmers didn't get to turn a wheel because it was just so much rain every week. Yeah. You look in Missouri where we are, we've seen that constant rain, Kansas, some other areas. So do you think that April turns better, May turns better? I mean, will we see kind of this rain let off?
I do think we're going to see more breaks than we saw last year. I think the volume of precipitation that we get is going to be less than last year. As we progress deeper into the spring and summer, we're going to actually see a decline in the amount of precipitation. I'm still expecting the summer to turn a little dryish. So, contrary to the National Weather Service, that's where I'm going. So I think as time moves along, we're going to see a lessening of this pattern.
Why do you think we're going to see dryness this summer? What signs are you watching?
Well, there's a number of things, but the primary ones is the lunar cycle, the 18-year cycle as I call it, very much has below average precipitation suggested in each of the 3 summer months. Now, I'm not talking drought. Don't go down that road, okay? We have so much moisture in the soil that it's going to be evaporated out and generate thunderstorms. But the rainfall will probably be less than usual. The other thing is the Pacific Decadal Oscillator is moving more negative. I don't expect a full-blown negative PDO all the way through the summer, but having it trend that direction reinforces ridge building in the middle of the country. And so that'll happen during the summer as well.
All right, but until then, it sounds like your spring forecast, it could be better than last year.
It'll be better. It's still going to rain. It's still going to be delays. So don't get too far ahead of me. But it's not going to be as widespread and as serious as it was last year.
Some good news. We need that this week.
Right.
Thanks, Drew. We appreciate it. All right, we'll take a quick break, and then we'll have much more right here on U.S. Farm Report.
Got equipment to sell privately but tired of scams and hassles? Visit MachineryPete.com and click Sell Mine. MachineryPete.com, the simple and secure.
Welcome back. Well, every weekend, Mike Hoffman gives us a look at the latest Jetstream and the trends. But has the Jetstream changed? Here's John Phipps.
Almost every week, Mike talks about what is happening with the Jetstream, which, of course, we all know all about, except maybe we don't. So I thought I would just review the basics so that we can better understand what changes in the Jetstream might mean. Here's an illustration of the polar jet stream, which is the one that affects our weather in our latitudes the most. It is a rapidly moving current of air about 30 to 40,000 feet above the Earth. The speed of this current is shown by the colors, with red being the fastest, which runs around 120 miles an hour normally. It is caused by two primary phenomena: temperature differences between large masses of air in the atmosphere and the Earth's rotation. The idea of the jet stream began after the historic explosion of Krakatoa in 1883, as ash and smoke from the volcano zipped around the world at previously unheard of speeds. This speed is important to the aviation industry, since the jet stream altitude is a good cruising altitude for jets. Using the jet stream when going west to east can cut travel time by up to a third. Here's the diagram showing how airplanes that use that tailwind. It doesn't look like it on a flat map, but the Great Circle route is in fact the most direct geometrically. Flying back to the U.S., pilots try to enter the jet stream to save fuel and time, which gets us to the recent problem with the jet stream. When Mike tries to forecast where it may be over the next few weeks, his job has gotten much harder over his career, as the jet stream has gotten wavier, for lack of a better word. As you can see in this diagram, the polar jet used to be fairly predictable, and while it changed position over the years, it was often described as following the sun, more to the north in our summer and more to the south in our hemisphere's winter. Due to climate change, and especially the rapid heating of the Arctic, our polar jet stream now offers more variability and unpredictability. The waves have also made the term cut-off low about as scary as drought for farmers like me. Storms that can't make all the turns, so to speak, and stay attached to this wavier jet stream can sit and dump rain on the same area for days or even weeks. It has also complicated air travel, as you can imagine. Flights have reached record velocity, and more of them are experiencing unprecedented turbulence, the dreaded clear air turbulence, which, if you've never experienced, be glad. It's also why some of us never take our seatbelts off. So when Mike talks about a shift in the jet stream and possible effect for farming weather, I'm just glad I'm on the ground looking up at that problem.
Thanks, John. Well, when we come back, not even historic flooding could stop one farmer from pursuing his passion for antique iron. Tractor Tales is next.
Tractor Tales is brought to you by eTractor.com, Sullivan Auctioneer's new online equipment platform, eTractor.com.
This 1206 is my favorite. I like that paint scheme, that red and the cream and the gray. I always wanted a 1206 to restore, and this one came from Norburn. It belonged to Ronnie and Billy Lyon over at Norburn, and I bought it from them and I restored it. That's, you know, everybody wants 1206 to restore, so my dream has come true. I had to completely go through it from bumper to bumper, and it's basically a brand new tractor now. All I do with it is go to shows and tractor rides. That's all it does. It's retired. I went to Norburn last year to the Soybean Fest, and I won with this 1206. It returned back to its home. I got a trophy and 2 pork chop dinners. Well, we had to completely overhaul the motor, and then we went through the transmission, and we put a new torque and a new clutch in it. We overhauled the shift on it, and then we went through the rear end. We just basically just tore it all to pieces and overhauled it and put it back together. I've got about 7 other tractors that I've done, but my restored has kind of come to a screeching halt. When corn was $8 a bushel, it was easier. That's the last year they made them. They made them 3 years.
Thanks, Kent. Well, the flood of 2019 didn't just suffocate this land behind me. It really caused devastation all along the Missouri and Mississippi rivers, as well as the tributaries that lead into those rivers. So as we head into 2020, are farmers preparing for a battle similar to 2019? That's our Farm Journal report next.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast. Welcome back to U.S. Farm Report. Trusted, timely, tradition.
Well, it was just over a year ago when the bomb cyclone hit the plains. Along with an already high river, that system was the catalyst for historic flooding. And while so much has changed in a year, a lot hasn't. That's this week's Farm Journal report.
When the water got about 10 to 12 feet up on the side of the bend, it got water inside there in the grain. It caused the grain to swell, and it just popped the bend wide open.
This is the vivid scene today, one that all started nearly a year ago when we first visited this farm last March.
Not very much notice when it started. That wall of water came down and it just took right over.
The loss of this grain wasn't something insurance covered. That only added to the pain since Green just started renting this farm last year. His first crop would have been in 2019, and now he may not get it planted again this year.
This farm here, probably not, unfortunately, which is going to hurt.
Yeah, why?
Nothing has gotten done to the levee.
Green isn't alone. 40 miles northeast of him is where Ryan Meyerkorth farms.
50%, so half the farms were underwater and remained underwater until mid-December.
The Missouri farmer preparing to not farm some of this land again in 2020.
It's a battle, so we've had an open winter, so we've been able to get it onto the land, a lot of the land, and start the process of recovery. Just within the last few days until this rain yesterday, we've been able to just start trying to conquer some of the battles we face with everything from flood debris to sand. It was still going to be a long battle, another year of battling sand, to just levee repair.
And farther downstream is where Travis Matthews is.
2019, we started out in March fighting the high river. Got in the fields in April, went ahead and planted quite a bit, but there at the end of May we had the second rise and broke 3 levees. And rough numbers, we had 50% of our acres underwater by June 10th.
That's when water washed over this land, impacting 66,000 acres in Carroll County, Missouri alone. An area farmers now hoping 2020 has a better outcome.
Well, today, you know, we've already started in the fields. We've got the levee repairs going on. We've got about 800 acres that we will not farm this spring, I know for a fact. Sand deposits, drainage issues. It could possibly go over 1,000 acres. We don't know. We still got time to get some of that fixed.
Local landowners worked all winter to restore broken levees, but in other areas, both federal and local levee systems remain breached.
Just this levee system here, there was 8 major breaches. So it started just to the west here and then travels along this levee system that used to be to where this secondary levee meets the Missouri River.
And open levees means land is exposed to even the slightest rise in the Missouri River.
I think the risk of flooding is greater today than it was a year ago today. Just because those levees are open, it's not going to take as much water. Just because we know the soils are saturated throughout the basin.
Tom Waters is the chairman of the Missouri Levee and Drainage District Association. He says while flooding in 2020 is not inevitable, the risk is high.
The soils in north, South Dakota, Montana are well above normal saturation. They're just full of water. So when that ground thaws, whatever rain and snow we have is going to run off into the river.
Saturated soils are also a concern for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association. NOAA's spring flood outlook this week predicts widespread flooding in 23 states, covering 1/3 of the country. And the states at the most risk are North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. Judd Knieven is an emergency management chief for the Kansas City district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. He says while the grim flood forecasts are surfacing, he's optimistic major flooding along the Missouri River will not happen in 2020.
The reality is in the upper basin, we have very high soil moisture content. It did not freeze as bad as it did late season last year. And the plain snowpack, because of the warm air right now, has been melting off. So those are all good things. But for us down here, the real thing that drives flooding is localized heavy rainfall. And it takes a tremendous amount of water to produce what we saw last year.
Knieven acknowledging there is an elevated risk of flooding, especially in areas where levees are still breached.
Most of the runoff occurs between March and July, and then it takes the rest of the year to empty out in the upper basin. But if we can get through maybe till June and we don't see any significant runoff down here, we're probably sitting in pretty good shape. But it's a cross your finger thing.
Hope by both the Corps and those living along the river that 2020 turns out better than 2019. That's as the scars of last year's flood mean some of this fertile farmland will never be farmed again. Well, some of that land that you saw was actually planted in 2019, while others didn't get planted at all, and that created a record number of prevent plant in 2019. So how could that record number change the acreage game in 2020? Seth Meyer of the University of Missouri joins me in the studio next. Welcome back to our Weathering the Storm special. Well, because of COVID-19, doing things a little bit differently, Seth Meyer, due to some travel restrictions, actually joining us from Columbia, Missouri, University of Missouri's campus. Seth, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, we need to start out by navigating weathering a different kind of storm, this COVID-19. It just has a hold on the markets right now. Thursday saw some optimism, but give us some clarity. What is the market trying to figure out at this point?
So I think the market's trying to deal with the uncertainty here. You've been talking weather so far today, and it's a similar situation. In weather, you look for an analog. You say, hey, how is this year like previous years when it comes to planting? Folks are struggling to find an analog to this COVID-19 impact. Is it like the Great Recession? Are there impacts in the supply chain? That's what folks are struggling with, and I think the market doesn't like that uncertainty.
Yeah, speaking of uncertainty, some uncertainty around the future of ethanol plants, hearing fears that some ethanol plants will close. I mean, when you look at corn prices right now, look at the worry of ethanol. Is it more due to oil prices or is it more due to COVID-19?
I think it's this demand impact where folks are simply driving a lot less. You got to remember, while the RFS that everybody talks about is quantitative, within a given year, it's a percent. So every 1% less gasoline demand means the actual RVO falls by 1%. So I think that demand for ethanol is falling right along with gasoline in the short run, and that's what's putting them under pressure. And the fact that oil is now as cheap as ethanol or cheaper isn't helping the situation.
Talk about struggles, cattle markets this week. Box beef, total different story than when you look at cattle futures. Really, what is the dynamic right now in that cattle market and what's causing us to continue to go lower?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the cases where folks are both struggling with the short run impacts of COVID-19 and the long run impacts of COVID-19. When you look at box beef prices and you look at things like chuck for hamburger, those prices are jumping. And in some ways it makes sense. People are buying that at the grocery store, and they're also getting it through the drive-through. At the same time, when you look at live cattle, cash prices, they're softer, and the futures prices are even softer yet, saying the slaughter folks are worried about their ability to process those cattle. Are they going to have labor? Are they going to have distribution? You know, if there are folks quarantined or sick, are they going to have the labor they need? Are they going to be able to get those folks to work? So I think you're getting what's a bad spread for the producers, because in the short run there's some demand for these products,
right?
But the producers aren't able to benefit from it because there's concern about the ability to process.
Real quick, we saw a bounce on Thursday in the markets that seemed to be fueled by some possible interest from China in buying. When will the market switch its focus to Chinese demand? When will the markets then also shift its focus to this March planting intentions report that normally dominates market talk right now?
No, you're absolutely right. So I think we've got to see we got this bounce simply on rumors that the Chinese are coming in for some buys. When you look at the export report, that wasn't so dramatic, but it's today just a little bounce just from the Chinese showing some interest. So will the Chinese follow through? That gives some support to the market. And yeah, I think everybody wants to think about intentions. And we'll turn the focus to that, but I think folks are still going to be struggling up to the last moment with big decisions about what to plant on those marginal acres. Again, do they want to plant that corn, or do they think that ethanol prices are going to continue, ethanol demand is going to continue to be weak? Right now, NASA intends to put that report out, and I think we'll pay attention to it when it comes out, but everything's on the table between now and the report.
A lot of uncertainty. Seth Meyer, University of Missouri, thank you so much for joining us. Please stay with us. We have much more when we come back on our Weathering the Storm.
Weathering the Storm, a special edition of U.S. Farm Report, is brought to you by Pivot BioProven, the nitrogen-producing microbes that stay put, weather or not.
Well, the battle against the flood escalated last year in the Midwest. But the fight for water in the West is a battle producers are constantly facing. This weekend, Betsy Gibbon takes us out west.
Spring is an important time for crops in Fresno County, California.
That's your potential almond right there.
Trees have bloomed since then in this highly productive county. Even though it's a desert, growers here produce more than 350 types of crops.
So we rely upon a water supply coming from outside of this immediate area to be able to feed everything that we see around here.
Some of the water almond grower Ryan Jacobson depends on comes from snowpack on the Sierra Nevada mountains, which this year hasn't been much.
Our statewide snowpack is currently at 46% of average.
Nearly half of the state is under a moderate drought, which is higher than a year ago. However, those water issues could be more significant because of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which was signed into state law and then went into effect this year. SGMA is a 20-year state plan designed to manage California's groundwater resources. Some believe it could take away viable cropland.
I love this time of year.
Jacobson's area is fortunate enough to have surface water available, but every operation is different.
It's going to force farmers to either A, try to find other ways to bring in additional water supplies, or B, you got to tremendously cut back in some areas your usage of groundwater.
They believe it will put more pressure on growers to leave land fallow or take it out of production.
There could be anywhere from 500,000 to about 1 million acres fallowed because of SGMA.
Grimway Farms is considered the largest carrot producer in the world. Its president, Jeff Huckabee, says its location is ideal.
Kern County is the hub for carrots in the entire nation.
But SGMA is impacting carrot production and acreage.
But we have growers in every water district around, so some are saying, hey, I'm probably not going to have a lot of extra acres to grow carrots in the future. I've got a lot of trees or vines or things that I need to protect. And if I do get cut, I'm taking care of those first.
Even though SGMA pertains to groundwater, the whole water situation is complicated, and that includes surface water. California has both a federally controlled and state-controlled surface water system. In many cases, they actually share infrastructure. There are several pending lawsuits over these H2O laws, and the state of California is suing the federal government to prevent implementing its new biological opinion, which could change those laws.
Old science, obsolete studies, and overbearing regulations that had not been updated in many, many years.
Environmentalists and others say water needs to be managed with these different rules as to not deplete supplies and to protect endangered species such as native fish. Some farmers allege they've implemented changes in the past and it has not made a difference in helping those endangered species. Growers in some of the most productive land hope the act does not swallow water supply or their production.
When you look at the acreage and the volume that we do, it's feeding the entire nation.
Reporting for U.S. Farm Report, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Thanks, Betsy. Well, when we come back, is there any linkage between weather and heightened illnesses? John Phipps has customer support next. Well, whether it's the common cold, the flu, or even coronavirus, it seems cold weather is a breeding ground for illness. But is there any linkage between weather and sickness? Here's John Phipps.
This week, we devoted our whole program to weather, and at the time we scheduled it, it seemed like a good fit for mid-March. Events have a way of overtaking our plans, but a question I have been tracking might make this topic a little more relevant in the current circumstances. That is, how does weather affect the spread and virulence of disease, especially the dreaded COVID-19? Now, it's long been known there is a flu season, and it begins each fall and lasts too long, but cases eventually taper off in the spring. There are three popular explanations or theories why this happens. First, we spend more time inside, closer to other people during cold weather, and transmission of the virus is easier. Indoor air in the winter is much drier than in the summer, which can make our nasal passages less effective at trapping pathogens. This almost certainly is a factor. Second, sunlight hours decrease in the winter, lowering our production of vitamin D and thereby sort of diminishing our immune system. This one doesn't have strong evidence, but it can't be ruled out either. Flu viruses prefer cool, dry air to thrive in. This reason is almost certainly a powerful factor. Apparently, in higher humidity, the airborne virus absorbs the available water vapor, becomes too heavy to stay airborne, and falls to the surface. Relative humidity can plummet during winter, so investment in a whole house humidifier could be a wise decision. This is one reason many of us get colds, we think, after long plane flights. The air on high-flying jets is drier than a desert, and being crammed into an aluminum cylinder with a few hundred strangers makes a perfect combination for aerosol infection. The only problem with this temperature-humidity link is it seems to be true only in locations that have variable seasons, cool, dry winters. Flu transmission rates in warm climates indicate the virus can thrive in high humidity as well. What does this mean for coronavirus? Well, we really don't know. But right now, this chart doesn't show much difference in the transmission rates between warm locations and states and cold locations. So will warm weather help lower the incidence of the disease? Probably, but the bigger point is it doesn't mean it goes away. After all, regular flu virus comes back every year by surviving during high heat and humidity of the summer somehow. Recurrence this fall is highly probable. COVID-19 is so easily spread between people that the southern hemisphere will have this ready-made infected population that can travel to reinfect the north after our summer is over. We need a vaccine, not just a change of seasons to solve this problem.
All right, when we come back, in the midst of so much devastation, so much sadness, often come stories of triumph. And next, we have some light in the midst of all the darkness. We'll have From the Farm when we come back on Weathering the Storm.
It was a lot bigger project than we first originally thought.
The work since the 2019 flood started hasn't really stopped.
If my memory serves me right, we had like 6 dozers running.
Work done all winter by local landowners, ultimately conquering a major feat.
We've got 100% of our levee system, which is 19.6 miles, I believe, of 100% back to where it was before pre-flood.
A feat that seemed impossible at times.
It took us about 60 days to get that one shut off.
And an effort not even a raging river could stop.
This is the plywood fence that was put in on a Sunday afternoon to stop the river that was coming through right there, so we could finish plugging the last breach in our levee system.
How high was the water when you guys came in and put this in?
Water was running over that plywood.
The view from the ground.
This is where all the plywood was, and a lot still is.
That's just as astonishing from above.
That was the wainscoting, and the river took it away.
Adam Plattner has surveyed the flood damage this past year.
And then is that line on the bins, is that the flood line?
Yes, the high line is, yeah.
Remnants of flooding.
Is that a pivot system?
Yes, it flipped over.
With the river still high, Plattner says that's what makes the levee repair work done this winter so vital.
It's one of the repairs. acres, yeah. So, you know, the break was, that levee used to be straight there. So they build around the break.
And from 500 feet, Plattner is saluting the work these local farmers have done.
But these guys have done such an amazing job building up their private levees and everything. Just for crop insurance reasons, it's incredible.
Back on the ground, these levee fixes weren't cheap, but the only lifeline in stopping the surge of water from coming in.
Without the volunteers, we wouldn't be where we're at today.
An amazing effort community-wide.
We had businesses that would bring food in, keep everybody going. It was just hell of an effort.
Ultimately, it was an endeavor that washed up success in the midst of so many struggles.
I've talked to a lot of other levee districts that are still kind of holding out, waiting on the Corps, waiting on funding, and they're struggling. We have a wonderful community that comes together, and without them, we would not be near done with our breaks.
The victory may seem small.
That's going to be soft.
But for local landowners, they conquered the aftermath of a natural disaster.
Hell or high water, we're going to farm it.
An ode to an unrelenting group of farmers determined to keep the farming legacy alive.
We're very heavily vested in this bottom, and we want to continue to be here.
Well, that's all the time we have this weekend. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we're thanking all of you as you set out to battle Mother Nature in 2020. I'm Tyne Morgan. Have a great weekend, everyone.
U.S. Farm Report is produced and distributed by Farm Journal Broadcast.